So I want you to picture the air in the deep jungle canopy of this forest world, Shadrag. It is thick.
Oh, yeah, like that heavy, humid atmosphere that just clings to your lungs.
Exactly. And you are a fire warrior of the Two Empire, just crouched in the mud. For centuries, your civilization has conquered the stars through one very simple philosophy.
Technological supremacy.
Right. You are holding a pulse rifle, which is this weapon that fires magnetically contained plasma, right? It can burn through solid tank armor.
It's a devastating piece of tech.
It really is. So you hear a screech in the brush, and this towering, side-limbed alien horror just bursts to the vines. You fire.
And you hit it, right.
Dead center. The plasma bolt hits, the creature shrieks, its carapace melts into slag, and it dies instantly. So the line holds.
You take a breath, you're thinking, okay, this invasion can be stopped, the technology works.
Yeah, but then comes the second day. You hear the same screech. The exact same species of alien bursts through the brush. You fire the same weapon, you land the exact same dead center shot.
But this time the plasma bolt
It just disperses. It washes over the creature's hide like warm water. And then by the third day...
Oh, the third day is where it gets truly terrifying.
Right, because the creature isn't just immune to your plasma anymore. It has evolved active camouflage. It's completely invisible to your helmet's thermal sensors.
And its claws have hardened into these monomolecular blades specifically designed to cut through the exact alloy of your armor.
Which is just, it's a scenario that completely breaks the fundamental rules of military strategy. You aren't just losing a battle at that point.
No, the laws of biology and physics governing the war zone are quite literally being rewritten beneath your feet, faster than you can even comprehend.
And that utter violation of the rules of warfare is exactly what we're exploring in today's deep dive.
It really is one of the most chilling concepts we've ever covered.
We are unpacking this incredible piece of source material titled Gorgon, the biology of the adaptive hive fleet.
Which is such a dense, fascinating read.
It is. Our mission today is to tear down the myths surrounding one of the most terrifying entities in the galaxy. We're looking at a predator that doesn't just want to consume you.
Right. It wants to sample your blood. It wants to sequence your DNA.
Analyze your weaponry, and then literally rewrite its own genetic code in real time to become the absolute perfect bespoke weapon designed specifically to annihilate you.
It forces us to completely reevaluate our conventional understanding of this threat. Because, the Tyranid race, often referred to in the text as the Great Devourer, suffers from a massive misconception.
Oh, absolutely. The classic trope of the alien swarm.
Exactly. If you only look at the broad strokes, it is very easy to write them off as a mindless, endless swarm. Just a plague of galactic locusts that floods a planet with trillions of bodies.
Relying purely on overwhelming numbers, right? Just brute, unthinking force to drown the defenders in biomass.
But that is a fatal underestimation. What this text on Hive Fleet Gorgon proves is that the overarching hive mind controlling these creatures is staggeringly intelligent.
It doesn't just overwhelm, it calculates.
It engages in a lethally fast, highly iterative arms race. It isn't just eating its prey, it is learning from them.
It's terrifying because it means you are fighting an enemy that is literally weaponizing the scientific method.
Weaponized biology, yeah.
But to really grasp the mechanics of this, how Gorgon actually pulls this off, we need to contextualize it first.
We have to look at how this specific hive fleet compares to the rest of its monstrous family tree. Because Gorgon is, it's a massive outlier. What's fascinating here is how the source text establishes a profound contrast right away concerning scale.
Right, the size of the fleet?
Yeah, when you look at the major Tyranid invasions, you typically see unimaginable mass. Hive Fleet Behemoth, for instance, operated on pure blunt force trauma.
Just deploying colossal bioships that smash through defensive fleets.
Exactly. Or Hive Fleet Leviathan, which used pervasive psychic control. They projected a shadow in the warp that drove entire planets mad with dread before a single creature even made landfall.
But then you look at Gorgon, and Gorgon is remarkably small.
Very small by comparison.
Which feels completely counterintuitive, right? You'd think the most dangerous fleet would be the biggest one.
You'd assume so, yeah.
But the text explicitly notes that despite its smaller size, Gorgon holds the record for manifesting vastly more bioform varieties than any other hive fleet.
So they have less sheer mass, but an exponentially larger catalog of genetic variation.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this smaller size, because I'm trying to wrap my head around the logistics of it.
It's tricky to conceptualize at first.
Yeah, like if you picture Behemoth as this lumbering legacy corporate monopoly that crushes the competition, simply because it has endless cash to burn.
Right. The brute force approach.
Then Gorgon is like a lean, hyper-agile tech startup. The startup doesn't have $1 billion, so it survives by pivoting its product every single day to outmaneuver the bigger, slower players.
It's a really compelling analogy, but we need to stress test the reality of that pivot. Because in a tech startup, if you push a bad software update, your app crashes and maybe you lose some revenue for a day.
Yeah, you roll back the patch.
Exactly. But if Gorgon pushes a flawed genetic update to millions of frontline bioforms, those creatures die. The biomass is lost, and the entire fleet risks starvation.
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought of it like that. The biological cost of failure is absolute.
Exactly. There are no rollbacks in nature.
So the agility isn't just a strategy, it's a high-wire act without a net, which honestly makes their success even more terrifying.
It does, but that raises a massive chicken and egg question, which the text hints at.
Was this hypermutation an innate, pre-programmed trait of Gorgon's specific tyrannid strains?
Or conversely, was it a forced reactionary mutation triggered by the specific enemy they were fighting?
Right, the Tau Empire.
Yes. The primary foe Gorgon clashed with in this sector was the Tau, and the Tau are entirely defined by their own flexibility.
They are the innovators of the galaxy.
Unlike the Imperium of humanity, which often relies on, stagnant, ancient technology, the Tau revere rapid technological innovation.
Their Earth-cast engineers are constantly iterating on battlefield data, upgrading their armor, their drones, their plasma weaponry.
So it's the ultimate mirror match.
It really is. You have the Tay furiously iterating on their technology, metal, plasma, AI, and they run headfirst into Gorgon, which is doing the exact same thing, but with flesh, bone, and acid.
It's an unstoppable force meeting an infinitely adaptable object.
But getting back to the mechanics of Gorgon's size, if I have a massive global corporation and I try to update the operating system on every single terminal across the world simultaneously, the network latency is going to cause a crash.
Right, the bandwidth just isn't there.
So does Gorgon stay small specifically because pushing a complex new DNA sequence to billions of organisms across light years of space is just too resource-intensive?
That is actually the most prevailing theory among tactical analysts in the lore. A smaller, highly condensed fleet operates with much lower synaptic latency.
So the signal travels faster.
Exactly. They can field test a new mutation in a skirmish, observe the results, and push that updated genetic sequence to the breeding chambers of the entire fleet almost instantaneously.
Wow. So the condensed size isn't a vulnerability at all.
No, it's the optimized infrastructure required for their extreme evolutionary speed.
That makes perfect sense. And honestly, for anyone listening, there is a very real-world takeaway here.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, how often have you seen a massive, well-funded project or organization completely fail because it was too bloated to adapt to a sudden market shift?
All the time. Size can be a fatal anchor.
Sometimes agility and the structural ability to pivot on a dime are far deadlier and far more resilient than just having unlimited raw resources.
Adaptability is the ultimate survival mechanism, and what Gorgon did was weaponize that mechanism to a degree never before seen.
Which takes us from the theory of adaptability into the actual terrifying execution. Because having the blueprints for a new weapon is one thing.
Deploying it is another.
Right, how Gorgon actually deployed these biological updates on the battlefield. Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to look at their opening moves.
The hypertoxic arsenal.
Yes, the atmospheric poisoning.
The material provides a highly clinical yet deeply unsettling description of Gorgon's invasion strategy. They don't initiate a conflict by just dropping assault troops onto the ground.
Right, it's not a standard planetary assault.
Not at all. The first phase of the war is entirely atmospheric. They deploy overwhelming numbers of specialized sporecaster organisms.
I picture these as, like, massive floating biological chimneys just blanketing the target world's upper atmosphere.
That's a perfect visual. They pour out continental-scale clouds of toxins.
So they're essentially terraforming the planet into a toxic nightmare before the first ground troops even land. The sky bruises purple, the rain turns to acid.
But it's not just normal chemical poison, is it?
No, it's much worse.
It is exponentially worse.
Yes.
This is where we see the mechanics of their adaptability operating at the microscopic level.
The text explains that nearly every single organism within High Fleet Gorgon, from the massive ships down to the frontline infantry, possesses a specialized gland.
And this gland produces what the source refers to as a semi-sentient spore.
Hold on, we need to stop right there. A semi-sentient spore.
Hmm.
We usually think of a spore as just biological dust, like pollen or mold.
Right, something inert that just floats in the wind.
Yeah. So how can microscopic dust possess sentience? Are we talking about tiny little brains floating in the wind?
Well, not sentience in the way we understand conscious thought. It's more like algorithmic sentience.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Think of it less like a thinking animal and more like a biological hunter-killer drone. These spores aren't just static toxic chemicals. They are complex microscopic machines equipped with advanced chemotaxis capabilities.
So they can actually navigate.
Yes, they can sense chemical gradients in their environment, process that information through biological logic gates, and actively seek out specific genetic markers.
That is mind-blowing. So they are actively hunting for non-tyrannid DNA.
Precisely. They are programmed to seek and destroy.
But how do they know what DNA to hunt for? And how do they know how to kill it?
This is where the synaptic network comes into play. The text describes a process where Gorgon essentially tastes the flesh of its enemies.
Taste the flesh. That is so grim.
It is. When a frontline tyrannid creature engages a Tau soldier, it doesn't just kill the soldier, it consumes their biomatter, analyzing their blood, their immune system, their respiratory functions.
It's running a real-time autopsy right there on the battlefield.
A very aggressive autopsy, yes.
So the frontline soldier kills an enemy, sequences their genome, and then what? It uploads that data.
Exactly. The genetic and chemical data is transmitted upward through the synapse web.
Which is that telepathic biological network connecting the swarm to the hive mind.
Right. So the overarching intelligence processes this data, formulates a bespoke toxic compound designed to perfectly bypass that specific enemy's immune system, and then instantly downloads that chemical recipe back to every single spore-producing gland in the fleet.
It literally is biological cloud computing. The front line gathers the raw data, the central server crunches the numbers, and a patch update is deployed fleet-wide in real time.
That's exactly how it functions.
And the text highlights a chilling consequence of this. Because the network is constantly updating the payload of these spores, a simple scratch becomes a death sentence.
You don't need a tyrannid monster to bite you in half.
No, you just have to accidentally brush your exposed arm against a spore that has mathematically calculated the exact chemical sequence needed to paralyze your specific nervous system.
And we have to remember the context of who they are fighting here. The Tau are masters of rapid countermeasure.
Right, their whole thing is adapting tech.
Their engineers are used to encountering a new threat, analyzing it, and producing a new armor filter or medical antidote within days.
But Gorgon's iteration cycle was so fast, it completely outpaced the Tau's industrial capacity.
The Tyrannids were innovating new poisons faster than the Earthcast could manufacture the antidotes.
They were fighting a war where the air they were breathing was actively learning how to kill them faster. It's overwhelming just to think about.
It's an unwinnable race on a chemical level.
But to truly understand the friction of this rapid cycle of adaptation, to see the physics of it in motion, we have to look at the ground war.
The atmospheric poisoning is really just the setup.
Exactly. The source text provides a phenomenal case study of this hyper-evolution in practice on the forest world of Shadrag.
Shadrag is absolutely vital to understanding Gorgon. It serves as a perfect, contained microcosm of this endless cycle of action, reaction, and biological escalation.
Let's walk through this campaign wave by wave, because it plays out like a hyper-violent chess match. The setting is key here, too.
Right. Shadrag isn't an open plain.
No, it's a dense, labyrinthine jungle world. Massive root systems, impenetrable undergrowth. The tower defending it, and they've deployed their auxiliary forces, the Kroot, to hold the front line.
Now, for the listener who might not know, the Kroots are fascinating in their own right.
They really are. They are avian-descended mercenaries who fight alongside the Tau, and they have their own form of evolutionary assimilation.
They eat their defeated enemies to absorb their genetic traits.
Which creates an incredible thematic parallel. You have the Kroot, who slowly guide their evolution over generations through selective consumption.
Facing off against the Tyrannids, who weaponize consumption instantaneously.
It's the battle of the ultimate eaters. So, Wave 1 begins. Gorgon unleashes its standard shock troops, the Hormagaunts.
These are typically devastating, fast, leaping creatures with razor-sharp scythes for arms.
But Wave 1 is a total failure for the Tyrannids. Why?
The environment. The text notes that the standard hormigaunt anatomy, with its elongated side limbs and specific joint articulation, was a massive liability in the dense undergrowth of Shawdrag.
They just kept getting tangled up.
Exactly. They kept getting entangled in the vines and roots. The Kroot, being natural forest fighters, exploited this loss of momentum.
They managed to hold the line, slaughtering the entangled Tyranids. So round one goes to the Tau and the Kroot.
But the hive mind doesn't retreat. It analyzes the failure.
It sees that the chassis of its ground troops is flawed for this specific terrain, so it pivots.
This leads to wave 2. In a matter of hours or days, the breeding pools in the hive ships orbiting the planet alter the genetic template entirely.
So the next wave of hormigons that hits the surface has been drastically redesigned.
They are swifter, with altered limb structures and smoother carapaces specifically engineered to slide through the dense brush without entanglement.
They literally updated the aerodynamics for jungle warfare, and the result is devastating.
This new wave washes right over the Kroot defenses.
Because they no longer get stuck, their sheer speed allows them to close the distance, resulting in the slaughter of thousands of Kroot. Round 2 goes to Gorgon,
which immediately forces the Tau commanders to change their tactical doctrine.
because the terrain is no longer an obstacle for the enemy.
Exactly. So the Tau consolidate their forces, relying heavily on the natural toughness and close quarters skill of the surviving Kroot.
Which prompts Gorgon to iterate again. Wave 3.
The hive mind realizes that the main obstacle isn't the jungle anymore.
No, it's the biological armor of the Kroot themselves. Kruthide is notoriously tough.
Almost like leathery armor plating.
So Gorgon spawns a third iteration of hormigons. The text explicitly states these were honed specifically to pierce and tear tough Kruthide.
We can deduce that this required a fundamental alteration in their bone density and muscular structure.
They evolved natural weapons that acted like biological armor-piercing rounds.
Right, monomolecular edges, perhaps hyperdense chitin driven by vastly expanded musculature. And it worked. They completely swamped the Tau defenses.
But I want to pause here, because this is where the expert analysis really shines. You can't just add massive, dense, armor-piercing claws to a creature for free, right?
This raises an important question regarding the biological cost. Biological energy is finite.
There has to be a physiological trade-off.
Absolutely. If you drastically increase the density and mass of a creature's claws and the musculature required to swing them, you're adding a lot of weight.
And they need to stay fast.
Exactly. To compensate for that weight and maintain their required speed, the hive mind had to make sacrifices elsewhere.
They min-maxed their stats. For anyone who plays role-playing games, you know exactly what this means. They took all their points out of defense and dumped them entirely into attack power.
That's a perfect way to describe it. By hyper-specializing their biology to defeat the Kruthide, they accidentally weakened their own overall resistance to injury.
Their carapaces became thinner, more fragile.
Exactly. The Tau, being highly analytical, instantly recognized this new vulnerability.
Because the third wave hormigons were now structurally fragile.
The Tau adjusted their fire arcs and were able to simply gun them down from a distance before the Tyranids could bring those devastating new claws into melee range.
The Tyranids had manufactured a brilliant solution that inadvertently birthed a fatal new weakness.
It perfectly illustrates that hyperspecialization is a double-edged sword.
You plug one hole in the boat and the pressure blows out another. But the escalation didn't stop at physical claws. This is where it gets into the actual physics of the weaponry.
Right, the plasma immunity.
The text details a moment where Gorgon developed near-total immunity to Tau pulse rifle fire, which is astounding, given how pulse weapons operate.
They fire tightly contained packets of superheated plasma.
So how do you evolve immunity to the heat of a small sun?
Well, the Tyranids likely developed an incredibly complex ablative carapace. Perhaps a highly refractive endothermic mucus layer that instantly disperses extreme thermal energy across the entire surface area of the creature.
Which prevents the plasma from burning through a localized point. So the plasma hits them, and the heat just bleeds off harmlessly.
And this creates an incredible crisis for the Tau. Their state-of-the-art energy weapons are suddenly useless.
So what do the highly advanced, technologically superior Tau do? They have to scramble and completely change their loadouts by raiding the armories of their primitive mercenaries.
They pick up captured Kroot rifles,
which are essentially primitive kinetic slug throwers. They just fire solid metal spikes using chemical propellants.
It is the ultimate irony.
The hyper-advanced alien empire is saved by reverting to primitive guns. But why did it work? Why were the Tyranids immune to plasma, but vulnerable to a basic bullet.
Because of the physics of the adaptation itself.
The endothermic mucus layer.
Right. That layer that Gorgon evolved was perfectly designed to disperse thermal energy and electromagnetic containment fields. But a solid metal slug doesn't rely on heat.
It relies on massive kinetic energy and blunt force trauma.
Exactly. The mucus layer offered absolutely zero resistance to a heavy piece of metal slamming into their fragile carapaces at supersonic speeds.
The adaptation was too perfectly tailored. Gorgon built a shield that perfectly stopped lasers, but forgot to make it capable of stopping a rock.
It's a brilliant tactical observation from the source text.
But Gorgon didn't just adapt to weapons, they adapted to the electromagnetic spectrum itself. The text mentions they spawn hormigons and gargoyles, which are their winged units, with chameleonic hides.
Active camouflage engineered directly into the cellular structure of the beast.
Chromatophores that instantly mimic the exact light and color patterns of the jungle around them. Just imagine the sheer psychological terror of that.
You wouldn't even see death coming.
No, you are in a dense, sweltering jungle. You know you are surrounded by thousands of razor-clawed monsters, but the canopy is completely silent, and you literally cannot see them until the leaves right in front of your face part, and a sigh that takes your head off.
It is absolute nightmare fuel. It creates a relentless, exhausting paradigm for the defender. Every time you find a tactical solution, the enemy biologically invalidates it within a matter of days.
And honestly, reading through this relentless list immunity to plasma, invisible flying monsters, armor-piercing claws, it feels like an utterly unwinnable war of attrition.
It certainly looks that way on the surface.
If an enemy can mathematically counter every single move you make in real time, how on earth do you defeat them?
You don't try to defeat the adaptations themselves. That is a game you will always lose.
So what's the play?
To win, you have to look past the frontline bioforms and analyze the underlying infrastructure that is generating those adaptations. You have to find the structural flaw in the network.
Which brings us to the most crucial part of this deep dive, the exploitation, the fatal flaw hidden in Gorgon's genius design.
If we connect this to the bigger picture to understand this flaw, we have to look at the macro logistics of Gorgon's entire strategy.
The blistering pace of evolutionary warfare.
Yes. The constant sequencing of enemy DNA, the rapid gestation of millions of highly specialized troops, the continuous replacement of fallen waves, it carried a catastrophic energetic cost.
Right. Biology requires fuel. You can't just 3D print millions of complex, invisible plasma-resistant monsters out of thin air. You need raw biomass. You need calories.
Precisely. And because Gorgon was a smaller fleet to begin with, its biomass reserves were strictly limited.
So they had a tight budget.
To maintain this relentless day-by-day adaptation cycle, they couldn't afford to build large, durable creatures. They had to rely heavily on a strategy of mass-producing smaller, less complex bioforms that could be incubated and spawned incredibly fast.
The text calls it a reliance on the expendable gaunt strains, the classic Zerg rush mentality.
Throwing millions of cheap, highly tailored, disposable troops at the Tau line.
Fully expecting them all to die, just so they could analyze the battle data and spawn a slightly tweaked version the very next day.
But by funneling almost all of their available biomass and gestation time into producing these endless waves of small, iterative bioforms, Gorgon created a massive structural deficit.
They severely lacked the larger, more complex Tyranid biomorphs, the heavy hitters of the swarm.
Exactly. So what does this all mean?
Let me throw an analogy at you, see if this tracks. Imagine a modern military that completely abandons tanks and heavy artillery. Instead, they rely entirely on deploying swarms of millions of cheap AI-driven drones.
Okay, I follow.
These drones are constantly adapting to enemy movements. They overwhelm the airspace, and they are terrifyingly effective. But because they are so cheap, they don't have built-in processing power.
You need a remote signal.
Right. They have to receive their instructions from a handful of highly complex, incredibly expensive command towers hidden in the rear. If the enemy spends all their time trying to shoot down the millions of drones, they will eventually run out of bullets and lose.
It's a very sound analogy, but we need to push it one step further for the Tyranids.
Okay, how so?
The larger creatures in the Tyranid swarm, the hive tyrants, the Tyranid warriors, the zoanthropes, they aren't just command towers relaying a signal. They are the localized processing power.
Oh, I see.
They are called synapse creatures. They project the psychic web that connects the feral, animalistic intelligence of the small creatures to the vast, calculating intellect of the hive mind.
So they are the local servers hosting the cloud computing network.
Exactly. And the source text makes a critical point here. The few large synapse creatures that Gorgon did possess could not be easily replaced.
Because the fleet's entire biological infrastructure was hyper-focused on churning out the small, rapid mutation strains.
Right, so it took immense time and resources to spawn a new hive tyrant. This became their chief vulnerability.
The macrostructure was glass. And the Tau commanders finally realized this. They realized they were playing the wrong game.
They stopped trying to hold the line against the endless waves of adapting gaunts.
But they didn't do it alone, did they? The text mentions a fascinating alliance.
Yes. In a rare instance of pragmatic cooperation in this universe, the Tau forces actually teamed up with units of the Imperium of Man.
Which is wild because they usually hate each other.
They do, but the Imperium brought centuries of hard-fought, bloody experience regarding Tyranid behavior to the table. They recognized the pattern of the synapse web.
So you have the Tau, with their incredible tactical flexibility and precision firepower, combining forces with the Imperial forces, who know exactly where the Tyranids' weak points are.
And together, they shift their entire strategic doctrine. They initiate aggressive assassination protocols.
They bypassed the endless mutating swarms entirely and made the elimination of Gorgon's larger synapse creatures their absolute, uncompromising priority.
They started headhunting the servers.
Yes, headhunting the servers.
By utilizing precise strikes to eliminate these rare, hard-to-replace command organisms, they systematically severed the Tyranid synapse web across the war zone.
And the results were immediate and catastrophic for Gorgon.
Because without that psychic web connecting them to the hive mind, the drones lose their programming.
Exactly. The vast swarms of tailored bioforms lost all strategic cohesion. They reverted to their base animalistic instincts.
The hyper-accelerated adaptation cycle just ground to a halt because there was no central intelligence to process the genetic data.
The invisible, armor-piercing horrors just became confused animals, making them, as the text implies, disorganized sitting ducks.
It is the ultimate tragic irony for Hive Fleet Gorgon.
It really is.
Yeah.
The very thing that made them a nightmare, their absolute reliance on rapid, expendable, tailored evolution, was the exact mechanism that left their critical leadership nodes exposed and impossible to replace.
They min-maxed their entire civilization to win the microscopic arms race, but left their macrostructure completely undefended.
It serves as a profound cautionary lesson in the logistical realities of conflict. Hyperspecialization provides immense short-term gains, but it inherently introduces catastrophic long-term fragilities.
Which brings us to the end of our session today. Let's consolidate the core takeaways from the nightmare of Hive Fleet Gorgon, because there's an immense amount to digest here.
First and foremost, the source text definitively proves that the Tyranid threat is not just a blunt instrument. It is a hyper-intelligent, rapidly calculating predator.
Gorgon's legacy isn't merely destruction. It is the establishment of a chilling, galaxy-wide paradigm where biology itself is treated as a malleable, real-time weapon.
And we must always remember that these analyses are most valuable when we apply their underlying principles to a broader context. Yeah.
Gorgon's history is a masterclass in understanding the hidden costs of adaptation. It demonstrates that every evolutionary leap, whether in biological ecosystems or technological development, carries a metabolic or logistical price tag.
Escalating arms races almost always create new, unexpected vulnerabilities just as quickly as they forge new strengths.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You look at something mundane in the real world, like the escalating crisis of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and suddenly you see the exact same mechanics of adaptation and counter-adaptation playing out on a microscopic scale.
It completely changes how you view the concept of survival. But before we sign off, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, lingering thought. A theoretical implication drawn directly from the mechanics we've explored today.
The question of assimilation.
Precisely. We established the core mechanic of Gorgon's terror. They adapt by tasting the flesh of their foes. They sequence the DNA, they learn, they integrate.
And over the course of this brutal war, Gorgon consumed thousands, perhaps millions, of Tau soldiers and Earth-caste engineers.
A species wholly defined by their rapid technological innovation, their forward-thinking logic, and their unparalleled tactical flexibility.
Exactly. The Tau aren't just physically distinct. Their entire neurological and genetic profile is geared toward rapid problem-solving and fluid strategy.
So if the overarching Tyranid hive mind truly learns, processes, and permanently adapts with every single unique life form it consumes across the galaxy, what happens next?
It implies a terrifying synthesis.
What forward-thinking, strategically flexible traits did the surviving remnants of Gorgon absorb from the Tau?
If the hive mind absorbed the Tau's intrinsic capacity for rapid tactical iteration, What kind of terrifying predictive blueprints are they incubating in the deep dark of space right now?
It suggests that the next major Tyranid invasion won't merely be biologically tailored to the environment. It might be tactically predictive, anticipating enemy countermeasures before they are even deployed.
Which drags us right back to the nightmare scenario we started with.
The enemy, where your weapons work perfectly on day 1, barely work on day 2, and are useless by day 3. Only next time, because of the tactical genius they digested from the Tau, they might just biologically adapt to your weapons before you even pull the trigger.
That's a sobering thought to end on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the details, and we'll catch you on the next one.